Hello, everyone. Agent of Insomnia here, and this is going to be a little bit of an unedited ramble. I'm not going to reshoot it, and it's about a video posted by Robert Wallace on November 6th, like 2 weeks ago. And I'm sorry I was very unavailable for watching long videos. I had this on my watch list, and then after I got out of a lot of work that I had been doing, and now that I'm free, I watch it and I find out he responded to me. And I'm like, whoa, ouch. I'm sorry. It's taken me this long to get back to him on this subject. So the video that he posted is listen and believe is unethical, right? And it was a response to my video about accusations and piling on. So that's the train of videos if you want to watch them all. Link in the description box. So I agree with like 99% of what Robert Wallace says in his video. In the world where hashtag #MeToo fever has taken over and people are listening and believing, people are basically going with guilty until proven innocent instead of innocent until proven guilty. Accusations are becoming fact, which they should not be. So, the part of Robert Wallace's video that I disagreed with, like one turn of a sentence there, I'm going to play. But don't be thinking that I don't agree with like 99% of what he's saying, because I do. I'm just responding to this one little part, because that's the tangent that the rest of this ramble is going to go off on, okay? Here goes.
And that was the ethical question, actually, that Agent Adult raised as he started talking about the listen and believe. And I believe, if I remember correctly, he only took a couple of sentences with it in his video as he went on. But that's a great fucking ethical question. At what point in time is listen and believe the good thing to do? So I don't think it ever is. I think it is unethical on its face.
Okay, so that's the part I disagree with. And I feel like, from my perspective of having to listen and believe people daily on the job, it's really apparent where listen and believe is supposed to be. Its proper context is when I'm sitting across from someone who I am giving a service to for their own well-being, and it's me, them, and the four walls around us, and nobody else is involved. Okay? For instance, on the job for me, I might have somebody who presents to me after a drinking binge, and they need one little bit of screening counseling to be able to get out of the situation that they're in. Maybe they're on a mental health hold for being so drunk, whatnot, and they just need to be given that one little bit of counseling. In that little bit of counseling, I might come across the fact that the reason why they were binge drinking is that they were sexually assaulted. Right? In that moment, I should be listening and believing them. It's just me and them, the four walls around us, complete confidentiality, right? I am there to advocate for them and help them, with the problems in their life. I am not there to prosecute anyone else outside of me, them, the four walls around us, right? And this is a really fundamental thing that weaves its way through most schools of psychology, right? Where you're dealing with a client, and most of them have a different way of saying it. They all have their unique way of saying it, but unconditional positive regard would include not being judgmental of the client. You know, so that's from Jung to Rogers to Miller and Rolnick with motivational interviewing. It's like this feeling that comes through all of those schools of psychology where you're really trying to help the client come to terms with the problem on their own, right? And if you are being judgmental to them, you're just going to shut them down, right? Listen and believe in those circumstances where you are dealing with a person who is a victim. They're presenting to you as a victim. It is key to not shut down the conversation and help them work through, well, where do we go from here? How do I feel about this? What happened? My profession is not the only profession that should be doing this, okay? Another such profession would be lawyers. If you were on either side of a court case, either the prosecutorial side or the defense side, if your lawyer that is representing you says to you, your story really doesn't add up, and I'm finding these holes in it, and I'm inclined to not believe you because I can't make sense of these two contradictory things that you said, or I just don't understand where you're coming from. And I think I might understand the other person a little bit more. Rightly, that lawyer should be fired because they're not going to give that person that they're representing their best case. They're not going to work as hard, or at least the person being represented is going to perceive that they're not going to get a fair shake at justice, right? And so, yeah, I find that in that sort of circumstance, just the relationship between the service provider and the person that they're providing service for, listen and believe, is key to having a good relationship with them, right? Therapeutic, service-oriented. That you could be a salesman, and these could be really good tips for you. But where this ramble is going to go on a really weird tangent is this is also good for detectives, police, right? Now, we have an adversarial sort of criminal justice system where we have the defense and the prosecution. And in that setting, of course, one side is not believing the other side. And that is where Robert Wallace's entire video is really on point. We are a society of innocent before proven guilty. But within that relationship between the person and the person advocating for them, these principles of listen and believe should be used, right? That is the proper context. So a good measure of whether you should listen and believe is how many people are a part of this relationship, and are you providing a service to the other person in the room, right? As soon as you are listening and believing and there are more people involved, it's not just you, the person, and the four walls around you, that's where you're outside of the proper context, right? If you can't just minimize it to that. If the extent of listening and believing would then encroach on somebody else's right to be listened and believed by the people advocating for them, then you run into problems. Then you have one person's allegations becoming, fact over another person before any sort of really weighing of the situation. any sort of justice, right? And that is kind of ironic that the people who are pushing for social justice want one side of that equation to be way more powerful in their allegations becoming fact. Yeah, that's not justice. But I feel like in police detective work, when a detective is interviewing a victim, even they have a lot of training about how to present themselves to that person in order to get their story out of them. Because if they come to them as a judgmental person, like, why were you walking down that dark alley? Why were you dressed that way? They're going to shut down the conversation. They want as many of the facts as they can pull out of that interview, right? And as soon as they leave that interview room where it's just the victim, the officer, and the four walls around them, that's where the listen and believe should stop. Immediately, the officer should look at his notes and go, like, okay, well, even though I was putting on this face of, listen and believe while I was there, let me just review some of these things I wrote down, right? And that's the best way to not make a victim feel re-victimized and hurt them psychologically, right? And I feel like when we see a lot of depictions of listen and believe, especially in popular culture, with crime dramas and procedurals, they call them, on TV, such as my favorite one, Law and Order SVU, right? Sometimes people try to take the lessons that they learn for those situational great context for using a technique, and then they would try to apply that to all the rest of the situations in the world, including those where it's not really appropriate. And so we have a lot of people learning that listen and believe is the way that we should operate in life by watching TV and seeing situations where it's great drama, and it was the great answer to how to get a victim to open up, was to just have that one cop who actually understood them and believed them, right? And that was the key to unlocking the whole case. And if there were just more cops like that, and if there were just more people like that in the world that just believed the victim, and then they just started believing everything willy-nilly. Their mind is so open that their brain falls out, right? Because they're just modeling what they see as far as values, and they're unfortunately taking values from one context and placing it on a context where it's not appropriate anymore. Hopefully this made sense. I still am suffering from a bit of sleep deprivation right now. But yeah, there is a proper context for listen and believe. There is a place where it is very ethical to be practicing it. And it is not in a court of law, and it is not in a court of public opinion. It is pretty much nowhere that you can't just reduce it to one person providing a service to another person who needs that service.